Ollie, Brent coming up later on to talk about Montreal. But to start with, our boy JMO, John Molinaro from TSC Republic.ca. Hey, JMO. How you doing?
Hey, how are you guys doing?
Well, we're doing very well, thank you. We're going to celebrate the successes of Toronto FC the next 15 minutes or so. I guess the Canadian MLS story is a tale of three cities, right? One really good, one really bad, and the other seemingly on the long road to nowhere. That's TFC, I think. Although right now they're still hanging on just about to a playoff spot. They lost to DC United on the weekend. They're off this week, of course. Then 6 games left, plus the Canadian Championship final against Vancouver. Now they're in 8th place, but have played one match more than their rivals. So they could be out of the playoffs very shortly if this form continues. I want to just quote John Herdman, JMO, from post-match against DC. He says, everyone's got to bring their best. We just get too comfortable at times over the summer in Toronto. We've got to get in this fight. We have to get in this fight together and people finding the next best level. And that's where I'll be pushing this week. All right. Too comfortable in Toronto this summer. What does that mean? Has John Herdman just finally lost his rag with this team?
I think he's getting there. I think his frustration was pretty evident, when speaking to us after the game. That was a game that was winnable, and they really had to have, because DC is one of this whatever it is 6 or 7 teams that are chasing them, who from May until I think it was June, early July, went winless through like 11 games in a row. They're not a very good road team. So this is one of the teams that, Toronto, as you said, is really clinging to a playoff spot, had to beat. And they came up with such an objectively uneven and uninspired performance. So I think he's really at his wit's end, to be perfectly honest. He's not getting enough out of Lorenzo Insigne. There's been, inconsistent performances from too many players. Both Osorio and Bernardeschi were missing from that game due to a yellow card accumulation, which, they picked up their 5th yellow cards in the Houston game, which were totally needless because they weren't for tackles or, missed time challenge. They were just sort of, remonstrating with the referee. So I think he's clearly frustrated, and I think he's frustrated by what's going on the pitch. I think he's frustrated that, GM Jason Hernandez couldn't do more during the summer transfer window, sort of bring in reinforcements. I think, we've talked about it at end. I don't think it's any secret that this team is in desperate need of reinforcements at the forward position. I think they're a little bit soft in defense sometimes. So I think I think it's just kind of getting to John a little bit, and he's letting his frustrations sort of steep out a little bit.
John, do you think that Insigne is a bit of a distraction in the dressing room, and obviously making a ton of money, and it hasn't really been performing? What do you think? What are your thoughts on him?
I don't know that he's been necessarily a distraction, Craig, but I mean, I do think, he's well liked within sort of like the from everything that I can gather, and just from speaking to people, he has this sort of respect from the locker room just because of his reputation, what he's done and everything. But I don't think there's any question that he's vastly underperformed since coming to Toronto, right? I mean, at least with Bernardeschi this year, he seems to have enjoyed a little bit of a renaissance, and is really, you could see the commitment on the pitch, and really, to the new position as well, right? I mean, John sort of asked him to play as a wing back, and he's really sort of fully embraced that role, even sort of the defensive responsibilities that he's been saddled with. I think Lorenzo is committed. I think it's just he can't seem to get it in a rhythm. I mean, he's 32, 33, and he keeps picking up these niggling injuries, and it's just preventing him from getting into a run of games where he can really kind of get some momentum going. And, John has talked about all season about the importance of managing his sort of loads over the course of the campaign. And I think that's part of the reason why he's just not been able to, as I said, again, get into this attacking rhythm. And he's let his frustrations out. I mean, you look at that Forge game. He scored, the winner, but he let his emotions get the better of him sometimes. I mean, a clean tackle from Benny Banga from behind, where he, takes him out, but he took the ball. It was an absolutely clean tangle, and he resorts to pulling on his beard and earning a yellow card. And he can be a temperamental player sometimes, and that can be good. But I think when you sort of playfully tug on an opponent's beard. I mean, that's probably a step too far. I'm not sure that was probably the best course of action.
But not to be a dead horse here, right? But that's the insanity of that contract, was that this is a player with an injury history.
Yeah.
Right? I think he arrived injured, right? His career, he's had moments of brilliance, but he was never consistent with his play because he was hurt so often at Napoli. And they throw this money at him in this long contract, and now they're surprised that he's hurt. Now, listen, that wasn't John Herdman, that wasn't Jason Hernandez, right? So you can't put that on them.
No,
but it infuriates me as an observer of this team that part of the reason why it hasn't worked out for Insigne is because he can't get in a rhythm because he's often hurt. Well, no shit.
Yeah, he had that. I mean, as a longtime Serie A observer, I mean, he had that sort of history at Napoli where. And not that he was always sort of injured, but it was, again, he was the type of player who'd be out for games, and you had to sort of like manage his load management and whatnot. And so and TFC was, I guess, not fully aware of this, but really only until John Herdman. I mean, I never really heard it mentioned at all until John Herdman mentioned it this year, is that, he said he sort of had his staff look into his career at Napoli. He said, it's quite surprising to learn that he started a lot of games, but he didn't finish a lot of games, and that he would, miss quite a bit of time to injury. So it's obviously something that the previous regime didn't take into account too much. Regarding the 15 million, Sharms, it is what it is. I mean, that's what it was going to take to get him here. I mean, we can sort of cry and bitch about it all we want, but I mean, at the end of the day, that's what they had to pay to get him here. Now we can, is he a $15 million player? No. I would argue that even he's not even living up to the salary cap hit that he's being assessed, which is what, 600,000 and change. I mean, I don't even think he's reached that level, of a DP level in terms of being worthy of his cap hit, which is really quite startling when you think about all the, his reputation and the money that they've thrown at him. So, but John is quite right to call him out. I mean, saying that he needs more out of him because he's clearly hasn't sort of stepped up and sort of lived up to the promise that so many people were expecting of him when he first signed here.
He called him out 2 games ago as well.
Yeah,
right? It was 8 games left, I believe, and he called him out and said, Lorenzo knows what he needs to do, and he needs to step it up. And well, now we've got 6 games left, plus a final. How big is that final? That Canadian Championship final for this team? Is it more important than making the playoffs? Surely not.
I don't think so. It's important. I mean, they obviously want to win a trophy. They want to sort of get back into CONCACAF Champions Cup. That's a big priority for the club. During the glory years of TFC, when they were, sort of making the playoffs and then winning MLS Cup and getting the final, they were a regular participant in the Champions League. And of course, that one year in 2018, they came within a hair's breadth of actually winning it. Down in Mexico against Chivas. So they want to sort of get back to where they're rubbing shoulders with the very best teams in CONCACAF, because ultimately I think that's part of when this team is at its best in terms of its identity. That's where it sees itself is in terms of competing with the best teams in the region and, really holding their own. So I think winning the Voyageurs Cup is important, but I think what it represents in terms of an entryway getting back into CONCACAF is really important to them. I think getting into the playoffs is, with all due respect to the Voyageurs Cup, I think getting into the playoffs is, priority number one, because we're talking about a team that hasn't qualified for the playoffs since 2020. And even then, when they did in 2020, they went into that sort of first round with great expectations because they just missed out on winning the Supporters' Shield, and then they, capitulated in a pretty tame effort against Nashville. So, and since then, it's just gone downhill drastically. They haven't come close to qualifying for the playoffs. I think they realize that the natives are getting restless, right? That, the fan base is, slowly turning on them, and that they have to sort of turn this around and show some sort of improvement. And, getting to the postseason is, the absolute minimum requirement. So, it'll be interesting to see how TFC navigates these two competitions, going forward, because September is going to be a busy month for them.
John, do you think there might be an issue with the scouting department as well? I mean, they brought an awful lot of players in. Etienne, Longstaff, Spicer, Flores, Gomez, Long. The list goes on, and they're still crying out for more backup. do you think, and the players that they brought in haven't been doing a job, and they still want more players to come in? Do you think there's an issue in the backroom staff with the players that they are bringing in and scouting?
I think possibly, Jim. I think, and I don't want to sort of make excuses for the club, but Jason Hernandez and John Herdman, they inherited like a lot of bad contracts from the previous regime in terms of Bob Bradley and whatnot. So he has limited cap space that he can work with, and there's limited sort of moves that he can do. Now, hopefully this offseason, it looks like they're going to be able to shed, a fair bit of some of those contracts. When you look at the general allocation money that they got with the Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy trade, I know everyone was upset about that, but that did sort of give them a whole whack of salary cap space that they can go out and sort of utilize. So, it'll be interesting to see what they do in the off season. But yeah, I mean, I think there's been some odd choices in terms of squad selection, in terms of who they've gone out and gotten. I think Derek Etienne has been a great sort of addition. I think Kevin Long has been a great addition. Debbie Flores has I was really high on at the start. I think he's kind of cooled off a little bit. Same thing with Matty Longstaff. I think they just have to be a little bit smarter. I mean, why, they've gotten sort of focused on getting all these sort of complementary pieces, whether it's in defense or in midfield, where again, where it's really screamed out is to getting a number 9, right? I mean, they're relying on Prince Awuso, who's been so incredibly streaky. I think he hasn't scored in MLS since May or June. This is a club in desperate need of a striker, experienced striker, whether that's someone who has MLS experience or European experience, who can bag them, 12 to 15 goals a year. I think that's what this team is absolutely crying out for, but they haven't been able to get it done. So I would think, and I would hope, if I'm a TFC fan, I would hope that, during the offseason, that's their top priority, that they finally address that, because they've been able just to skate by so far without it, and they're not skating by all that well, I would suggest.
Are we being too harsh on this team, JMO? In that, if you look at this time last year, I haven't got the table in front of me, but they were deplorable, right? They were way lower down the table, right? They have risen into a playoff spot at this point, and yeah, there's a lot of noise around who, but they have improved. They have made progress with John Herdman. So are we kind of all jumping on this team a little bit too early, saying, yeah, okay, we know where they should be given what they spend. We understand that. But given where they were last season to where they are now, there's a significant jump.
I don't think, no. I think, look, I don't think we're being too hard on them at all. I mean, we have to sort of hold them to standards. I mean, this is a team with, the second highest or third highest, whatever it is, payroll in the league. They've got designated players with the star quality of Lorenzo Insigne and Federico Bernardeschi. Yeah, they've improved since last year, but the bar was set spectacularly low in 2023 when it was their worst season ever in franchise history. So, I mean, I think that was the minimum requirement, right? Whether they would have to sort of, and be near impossible for them to be much worse. So, and yeah, look, they're in a playoff spot right now with 6 games remaining in the season. But as you mentioned before, everyone below them has a game in hand, and New England has 3 games in hand. So, they're just clinging to it. And I mean, I think you have to sort of hold them accountable and hold them to a certain standard. I mean, they have these sort of high-priced DPs. They have one of the richest payrolls in the league. They brought in John Herdman to great fanfare last August, thinking, practically fresh from his run, from leading Canada to the FIFA World Cup in Qatar. And the expectation was that, things were going to change. I appreciate that it's MLS and things sort of take time, and he was saddled with a lot of bad contracts, and he's got that a little bit of patience was required. But that said, I mean, they still have the resources to the point where they should be a little bit further along. The things should be a little bit further, more comfortable for them, instead of, just clinging on to that number 8 spot with 6 games remaining. So I don't think people are too harsh on them. And I think, we have to sort of hold them account, because, the expectations are there.
And you've alluded to it, John, just one last one here, Sharms.
Sure.
With the standards, with the resources that TFC have, will it be enough to satisfy fans and people around the team and internally, if they are able to hang on to that playoff spot they're currently sitting in 8th, or to win Canadian championships? Does it have to be both, or is one or the other going to be enough?
It's an interesting one, James. I think the fan base is so starved for success after 4 dreadful years that I think they would just be happy with the playoff spot, and especially because they're in the number 8 spot right now, so they would host it. If you could get them like hosting a playoff spot, I think not that there would be parades in Toronto, but I think that would be go a long way to getting the sort of fan base back on side and saying, look, there has been progress made. There is sort of pathway forward to turning this around and becoming, getting back to that point where they're one of the best teams in the Eastern Conference. If they can do that, if they can hold on to that number 8 spot and host a home playoff game, then I think that's massively important for a team that has just been absolutely dreadful the last, 3 or 4 years. Winning Canadian Championship, that would just be an extra bonus. That'd be gravy. I don't think winning the Canadian Championship and not making the playoffs, I don't know how far that would go in terms of keeping the fan base on side. I really do think it's has to be getting into the playoffs and ideally getting in as the number 8 team and hosting a home playoff game, just so that people have something tangible that they can, touch and see and actually go to BMO Arena. And I think it would sort of bring back sort of memories of like the golden era when, TFC was, hosting playoff games and winning playoff games.
JMO, in years to come, when you write your memoir, I really look forward to the TFC years. And people don't realize, but JMO is only 25 years old. Right? Right. And
please.
This is all TFC. Right?
Add 25 more on there, and then you got to.
Hey, man. Go ahead, Dubs.
JMO, when you say gravy, being an Italian yourself, and then with Insigne and Bernadeschi, are we talking like red sauce? Is that what we're saying?
No.
What are we talking about when we say gravy then?
Well, just I've kind of always heard that expression in terms of, it's just gravy. I guess it's kind of, I think of it more like sort of fries, right? I mean, fries are pretty spectacular, but if you get them with gravy, that's something extra, then it's even better. As full-blooded Italian, I absolutely hate it when people refer to sort of spaghetti sauce or pasta sauce as gravy. I just absolutely cringe when I hear that.
Okay.
I will not stand for it. Absolutely will not stand for it.
Okay.
JMO, I haven't seen any food posts for a while from you. I look forward to those.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on. I should probably get back into that. So I actually made like a killer pesto sauce with basil that I grew on my balcony on Saturday. So it was spectacular. So, and my girlfriend, who had never had it before, I made it for her. She was absolutely, going apeshit over it. So I probably should have tasted it.
You with the flex? Well done, JMO.
Look at Jamie Oliver over here.
The best way to a girl's heart is through her stomach. We know that, right?
Yeah,
it's 100% true. So I want more pictures. I want more of posts regarding your dietary and culinary brilliance, okay? Because you're a damn fine cook and you're a damn fine TFC reporter as well. Thanks, JMO. Brilliant. Really appreciate this.
Accomplished so much at 25.
Why is he dyeing his hair gray?
Just for JMO, gray hair.
JMO Oliver.
Yeah, no, that's brilliant. Well, listen, it could be worse though, right? It could be a lot worse, TFC fans. We'll say a lot worse. Expectations, right? I guess you got to manage those, but it could be worse. It could be a Montreal fan, right? Things have not been great of late for Montreal. 2 games since MLS resumed from its summer malaise. 9 goals against. I'm not sure if they even trained after crashing out of the League's Cup. It's been poor. Our man Ollie Brent of RDS and
Brett, not
Brett.
Like
Did I say Brent?
Yeah,
Sorry, Brett of
Brett.
RDS and BPM Sports Radio 91.9. Ollie, welcome back to the show.
Thank you. Just to make it clear there, James, are you making me some sort of senior manager in an office special?
David Brent.
Let's see the moves.
No, Wonger is our David Brent. So classic.
That's all I got.
The overbite.
That's classic. So okay, make sense of it. Can you, Ollie? Listen, we know this team has had moments of some good moments this year, earlier on in the campaign, but off the field, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. On the pitch, it seems to have just completely fallen off the tracks.
Yeah, and everything was so smooth at the beginning of the season, be it in terms of everybody getting on the same page, which definitely wasn't the case in 2023 under Hernan Losada, be it football-wise, communication-wise, human resources. Everybody seemed to be on different wavelengths. I was at training camp in Orlando at the beginning of the year, and everybody seemed to be speaking the same language. Everybody was coming back to something that was to resemble Wilfried Nancy football, obviously with lesser means than Nancy now has in Columbus. And I don't know if it's the Mathieu Choignard situation in May. I don't know if it's that game where you were 3-1 up in Chicago in April, I believe, with 8 minutes to go, and you end up losing that game 4-3, and it's just been a bit of a roller coaster, as you said, since then. And football-wise, my big concern is that you're not quite sure who's actually a big component of Laurent Courtois' process or philosophy or what he wants to build. That's from a player perspective, and then football-wise, you don't have much to hold on to, and that's the biggest concern for me at the moment with all the changes you've made in the summer transfer window.
And then speaking of all those changes, like you bring in players who are bright prospects in an attempt, I think, to shake things up for the good. But it seems to have the opposite effect. It seems to throw everything into more chaos, where on the field there's even more of a lack of identity. So what do you think with these new pieces, where maybe they're projected in the next couple of years as being important if Courtois is still around, or in like the identity and the club DNA? But for the right now, with, you know, this team where after that Leagues Cup break, which Sharm's referred to as the summer malaise, I believe, the new term for Leagues Cup, it looked like it was a possibility for this team to still have time to right the ship to make it into the playoffs. And now it looks like it's a real long shot. So what do you think about this team in terms of putting the pieces together just to get to the end of this season, just to limp there, to maybe have a little bit more time to put things together for a long-term plan?
Well, based on the last two games, what the end of the season is, the purpose for the rest of 2024 is preparing 2025, unfortunately, because 2 games ago, I was talking about two things were really important coming out of Leagues Cup for me, especially with all the new faces and the guys who left. A was finding the right seats on the bus for the right guys, and that's the case with any new arrivals. But there was urgency there because there was only 9 matches left. The second thing was the urgency within the players, within the camp, on the pitch, to get that feeling that, you know what, we've got 9 games to go. They had 5 at home, I believe, and we're in a run-in right now. You just haven't felt that. You didn't feel it at home against the Revs. You didn't feel it out at the weekend against Cincinnati, and that's a big concern. Now, where that comes from, I don't know, but I do believe that there's one element that doesn't help. It's the randomness of choices ahead of games for starting 11s and within matches when the changes are made. I mean, Jules-Anthony Vilsaint coming back out of nowhere starting. George Campbell coming out of Leagues Cup, hadn't played in a month, and he's a starter. Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy comes in, boom, straight away he's a starter. Next game, he's on the bench. Matthias Kokoro is once again reprimanded. He's in the stands against the Revs. He starts instead of Joseph Martinez a week later against Cincinnati. It's so hard to follow from the outside, and I don't think it's any easier to follow from the inside. And I think that's an issue right now, and it will be till the end of the season if there's not more stability.
Do you think it's the case of them just throwing mud against the wall at this point and trying to churn things up to get a reaction from the players?
That's a good question, because I've been scratching my head trying to figure out, is it not being absolutely convinced with the pieces that you have? Is it trying to, as you said, get a reaction? I think sending players in the stands, which has happened with so many players, Kokoro, Raheem Edwards, Joseph Martinez, Sunusi Ibrahim, and these are guys who statistically have had an impact on the season so far. So I think that's the intent behind that, I do believe, is to establish standards. And Gabriel Gervais, the president and interim sporting director, said that the coach had his backing with that because there were non-negotiables in terms of behavior, rules within the camp. And I'm okay with that. But the reality is you've got big pieces that aren't there in crucial moments, and then you just bring them back in out of left field. So I think there may be a bit of improvisation at the moment, but I think you should just pick something, go with it for 2 or 3 games and just see if things settle down, because The main danger for me is that you get to the end of this season and you still have the same questions. That will be a big problem ahead of 2025.
You're looking back now over the last 7 games, they've conceded 20 goals. In particular, the last 3 games, 11 goals they've conceded, only scored once. Do you think this is a team that needs to go back to basics, work on the basic fundamental defending, and maybe change your identity and style of play just to get these results? And like Dub said, just to finish in that playoff spot, make it ugly.
It depends where your target is, right? If it's short term, I think that could be justified. Having said that, will the players buy into it? Amy, we had a good few podcasts where we were wondering, Joel Waterman, I'm a big fan of his. He's a guy who's had such a progression over the years, came in from CPL, signed in MLS. We didn't have much expectation for him, and he did really well getting into the national team now. But our question was, is he a peacetime general because he has an awful lot of leadership, or is he a wartime general as well? You don't have that Rudy Camacho right now. You don't have that Laurent Simon that the Impact had back in the day. And I think that's a big issue, considering that you have a goalkeeper who's good. I think he's promising, but he is still green. That goal scored at the weekend is a good example. Your players have to make sure they defend that free kick a lot better. They make sure that you can't play it quick, but he has to feel that coming based on the fact that Cincinnati scored that same goal earlier this year as well. So I think leadership is an issue at the back, and maybe recruiting as well, because they recruited everywhere. They recruited in the middle. They recruited on the wings. They didn't touch the back line. They basically gave them a vote of confidence, and unfortunately that's not panning out at the moment.
What do you think, Ollie, with the 3 players that get the nod in for Jesse Marsh's 2 internationals this window, in Waterman, Sirois, and then Saliba, who's a late call to fill in for an injured Sam Adekubi? Do you think that looking at it as a glass half full or clinging to a little bit of hope, that might give them the boost in their level that kind of kicks them into gear to finish off this season strongly?
I think it's more of a safe haven to go somewhere where your thoughts would be a bit happier, especially for Nathan Saliba being called in. I think for not based on last game, definitely not, but based on the season, he totally deserves a look in, especially I think his target is 2026. And if he can get into that squad, it'll be brilliant for both CF Montreal and Saliba himself. I don't know if it's a good thing for CF Montreal. For the players, yes. Probably for the mood around the camp, yes, as well, because everybody got the feeling that Waterman, Samuel Piet, Mathieu Choignard, when they were at Copa, there was a different vibe about them, and they came back kind of refreshed, whereas the team was still kind of stuck in quicksand. So I don't think that has a huge effect. I think in terms of spin, in terms of communication, you have something positive to look forward to. Does it help Laurent Courtois' team in a concrete matter? No, I don't think so.
I asked this of JMO about TFC, but are we overreacting a little bit? I mean, they're 4 points out of potentially a playoff spot, right? It's not impossible. They could still find a way to creep in there. Are we overreacting?
I don't think so. In terms of results, it's absolutely possible to cling on to a hope of reaching the playoffs, but we're not overreacting based on the immediate effect the transfer window was supposed to have on the team. We know there are some long-term plans in there. Jaquil Marshall-Ruddy, Caden Clark. But Gabriel Gervais, when he came out of that press conference after the transfer window, said it'll be really hard to stomach if we don't make the playoffs. I thought that was a bit of a bold statement because there's so many unknowns in that team, and that's what the fans are concerned with. I think they saw Mathieu Choignard leaving. Everybody understands that a kid from Montreal signing in Europe, getting to live out his dream is great. But what's the plan after that? People still remember 2022, where so many players, Kone, Johnston, Kamal Miller in the end got traded because he was looking to leave after the World Cup. So they were Mihailovic as well, who's doing phenomenally now for Colorado. I think there was a feeling that we were over that hump and we were able to keep some sort of decent standard. And the issue is that after the transfer window that was supposed to bring in some new energy, the team is even flatter. So I think that's the big concern, on top of just philosophy-wise. Where is this team going? There's going to be a lot of questions about Laurent Courtois. I think they're legitimate. Having said that, there's way too much on the club's shoulders in terms of decision making, managing the Chouanière situation, sporting director leaving, his assistant leaving for San Jose as well. I think there are structural issues that have to be dealt with in the next few months to make sure that enthusiasm comes back, hopefully in the next few weeks, but especially next year.
Do you think that Ray being there, pulled in as a consultant, do you foresee him having a long-term impact or involvement in the club?
Well, listen, I wasn't expecting Montreal to move that much in the summer. Now, the issue is, you were there when Olivier Renard came in end of 2019. He came in with ideas. He came in with, like, he had a mission. Obviously, it was to make that team a younger squad, clean out the huge contracts that were given to players who weren't really contributing that much, and turning that club into a developing and selling club. But he also had his own ideas of who made that plan possible and who didn't. And that's the concern I see. If it's not going to be Corey Ray, the next sporting director, you've made some bold choices right now. And if somebody comes in December, for example, looks at the squad, can they say, well, we're going to undo everything that was done over the last 6 months because I don't really see it the same way? That would be a legit request from a sporting director who comes in to do a job. But the more you wait and the more you keep building a new team for somebody who's not there yet, well, the more of a chance you have of that happening. So with every week or month that passes, I think it gets closer to Corey Ray actually getting the job in the long run. If not, soon enough, you have to name a new sporting director.
The easiest thing to do is fire the coach, right? I mean, you see that every year, whether it's fair or not fair. With Courtois this season, I mean, what must he do to save his job, do you think? Is it at that point?
I don't personally believe so, because there's such I think the average duration of a club, of a manager in an MLS club is what, 2.5 years, something like that. So Montreal gets this feeling that in Montreal every 6 months the coaches change. I think that goes back to Jesse Marsh in 2012 being confirmed for 2013, and a few days later parting ways. Marco Schallibaum comes in 2013, has it in his contract with a 1-year contract that if he makes the playoffs, he's back in 2040. Makes the playoffs, ciao, we're going with Frank Lopez the year out. I mean, it was just such a revolving door, and people are still scarred from that. So in terms of communication, I think the club, not Courtois, the club would look really bad if they decided to fire him, because you were just so bullish on him at the beginning of the year, and you sold it as a new version of what we experienced under Wilfried Nancy. Now, I think a lot of stuff wasn't taken into consideration. Wilfried Nancy's 5 years and as an assistant in MLS and 5 years as an assistant in Montreal. I think nobody really understood how valuable that was for him to quickly get a handle on the group. But if Courtois is the one that leaves at the end of the season, I don't think you've solved the real structural issues that you have in building a squad, and especially attracting and keeping important, experienced players that will help the Nathan Salibas, the Jonathan Sirois. And that's what you've been seeing since the beginning of the season with Courtois. Kokoro, Martinez was obviously a hard one to deal with, but it's been like that in the past as well. Kai Kamara wasn't happy. He ended up leaving. Rudy Camacho decided to go to Columbus last year, and that was in a run for the playoffs, and you decided to take the money instead of keeping Camacho, with whom I believe you would have made the playoffs. So I think managing those more experienced players is something that Montreal needs to get right and become a lot better at in the next few years.
And I agree with you, Ollie, that it would look bad on the club if they just pushed Courtois out. But for a guy, you were down in Orlando or Arizona at the beginning of the camp, where everybody was filled with hope and promise of the coming year, season ticket record, 15,000 and new pieces coming in. It just looked like this is the season that they were waiting for. But to me, the last couple of losses, big losses, conceding 9 goals, 5-0 at home, like the sarcastic claps for Sirois for just going to claim a ball that was like nothing, just jumping up in the air. Is this a team now where like all hope is lost, and like he looks like a guy who's lost the room? So like, how is that pendulum swung so far?
Well, I think that club always had an issue with communication, be it towards the outside or in-house. I don't know what the dynamics are at the moment. I do believe, and we spoke about it earlier on in the season, Amy, that a coach coming in on his own in Montreal is a really, really tough gig. And I understand you've got Laurent Simon is a pillar. I don't think he'd want the job. And it was important for Olivier Renard last year to say, when we're going to look for a new coach, because I had asked him, when you bring in this next guy to replace Hernan Losada, do you bring him in on his own to be on an island really by himself, as we saw Hernan Losada, or do you let him bring a few assistants? He said, look, we haven't decided on that, but it is our job to make it safe for this guy to come in, to understand that nobody has a knife in their back pocket to make sure that you can stab the coach and just take his job the minute something goes wrong. So I don't know if those dynamics are still in place now that Olivier Renard is gone, but there are big issues in that team. I think the starting 11 selection has been off a bit too often. When you're praising a coach for making the right changes in game so often, it's probably because from the get you can adjust something and have it better from the first minute. That's the first thing. And then it's just the buy-in. That's the biggest issue right now. You don't feel that the players are buying in that much, because football-wise you don't see it, and in terms of effort you don't see it, even from players. And I'm a fan of what Jules-Anthony Vilsaint can become, but I mean, he was just brushed off the ball so easily, and the fight wasn't there for a guy who hasn't played for ages and had an incredible opportunity. So if those guys aren't really all in, yeah, you've got a concern, and hopefully you don't get to the end of the season where it all comes out like it did in the post-mortem in 2023, where the wheels fell off halfway through the season and we're only learning about it once the season is over.
Hey, listen, Eric Ten Hag's still in a job, right? So maybe there's a shift, more patience towards managers.
We nearly got through it, James. I thought you were
I know, sorry.
Brush that aside. I was very happy at the weekend to be in a nice little getaway with my wife in Chicago and not stood in front of a telly to endure the nightmare that is being a United fan at the moment.
Well, I thoroughly enjoyed that match personally, and I know Dubs did as well. So,
Olivier, you're not having the best of luck with your two teams, are you?
No, listen. This is the moment where I just go on YouTube and I watch Cantona clips and Roy Keane stuff. It's just the good old days, I suppose, when you had great kits that you had to take off at halftime because you couldn't see each other, and then you ended up winning the trophy at the end of the year. The real good old years.
The good old days when Craig Forrest was between the posts back in the 90s.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, miss those 9-0ers. I really do.
Ollie, thanks so much for this, mate. Hopefully it turns around for Montreal. I think as Canadian soccer fans, you want to see a successful Montreal and TFC and Vancouver, right? It's good for the game, but there's still 7 games left, so it's not impossible. But thanks so much for this. We'll chat to you real soon.
Thanks for having me on, and I really appreciate not going the basil route like JMO, because I don't have that on my balcony. So I appreciate you skipping that question.
But as a proud Quebecois, it's all gravy. What's your gravy?
You know what? I was a latecomer to poutine, believe it or not. So I don't know. I think I'm a bit of an anomaly. I'm not that fussy with gravy. I'm not that fussy with food, full stop, and that's why I didn't want to bring up the basil. And thanks, Amy, for making sure that we stay on a food topic. I thought
you would have for sure said a roast dinner.
Yeah, but I have to be in Ireland for that. Like, my auntie made the best roast dinner, and so that's it. And do I make it awkward now and tell you that she unfortunately passed away last spring? And
yeah, made it awkward.
Finish on that. Yeah, okay.
You did. You blew it.
Okay.
Well,
or I did, bringing up gravy.
Two aunties.
Guys, all the best. Bye.
Thanks, mate.
Bye, Ollie.
That's funny. Yeah, I like the food themes. I think we should keep the food themes going. Actually, I'm actually surprised. Didn't get a chance to ask Ollie there, but a latecomer to poutine. How is that possible?
I don't know, because he grew up in Quebec City.
Yeah.
I'm not a big fan.
Me neither.
Poutine, really?
Yeah.
Overrated.
Man. No,
I was a sauce, like frit sauce. It's called. So it's like the poutine minus the squeaky cheese, and that was like an arena staple. Like growing up, like
it's
our
just
whole...
gravy and chips.
Yep.
I don't mind that.
Really
so
good.
it's the poutine. Yeah, it's a cheese curds you don't like, Craig.
Well, yeah, I get, pretty much, because I
Really?
do like gravy on chips.
So yes, you got an issue with curds. The
I
cheese
guess I
curds,
do.
not the
Yeah.
I don't understand that at
It's
all.
a textural thing though, right? Like my kids call it squeaky cheese. Because like you can buy like at the depths or like the 7-Elevens, you can buy like little Ziploc bags with
Amazing.
just the squeaky cheese.
They squeak.
And actually, we had a friend and we called him the cheese guy because that was his job. He delivered all like the little small bags of cheese to all
Oh.
the depths. But I mean,
I
it's
bet he
an
got laid,
acquired taste.
the cheese guy.
Yeah, he did.
We use cheese curds in our steak and cheese pie
Oh,
because it holds its form a little better than regular or other types of cheese.
Ah, interesting.
Right?
You know, food
Mhm.
podcasts do really well.
They do, right? You know,
Yeah.
what the hell am I doing football?
Yeah, exactly.
Jesus Christ. Pie pod. Oh,
There you
that's
go.
an idea. I don't know what we talk about. We might run out of topics pretty quickly. We've got like 20 pies to talk about. Okay, see you guys. I'm going to start doing that
limited run, maybe. Yeah.
now. Limited run, yeah.
The
yeah,
football thing ain't working out.
it ain't working out. No, it's doing just fine. It's doing great. It's doing great. And despite the Canadian MLS teams, except for Vancouver, having a tough time, but listen, they could all still make the playoffs, right? And then we'll look like idiots, right?
Montreal's
Unlikely
a long
though, isn't it?
shot, I gotta say.
You know, the best part of today's show was the look of joy on your face, Dubs, when JMO called you Ames.
I know. I
That's
was
so
like,
nice.
Gmo. I liked
Yeah.
it.
Yeah, the barriers have been broken down.
Mhm.
There's a connection there formed. It's nice.
Yeah, and he just lit up though, also talking about well, actually his disdain for red sauce being called gravy.
There was
And
that.
that brought out, it was like delight, and then it was a really kind of sharp left turn into disgust. But he was passionate about it, right?
He was
Yeah.
more than he's more passionate about food than football, and he's passionate about football. But definitely, so JMO could be definitely a guest on my new food podcast,
Yeah.
which I'm starting up today.
I think it's a dangerous thing for his girlfriend not to like something he made too.
Oh.
Why? With balcony, she could be thrown off.
Stop.
If you're going to piss someone off, make sure they live on the first floor. So all I'm saying. Okay. All right. That's it. We're back tomorrow. We hope, we think, we're pretty confident we've got a great guest tomorrow. Okay. So make sure you stay tuned. Make sure you like this. You subscribe to our YouTube channel if you're watching this. And overall, just be nice to each other. That's important. JMO, thank you. Ollie, Brett, thank you.
Well
Love
done.
this David Brent dance, by the way. That was amazing. Jimmy, Craig, Ames, I'm Shams. Till next time. Cheers for watching and listening.
Till next time, ladies.
Can't believe he's gone all kind on us.
I know. What the hell was that all about?
Be
Well, I'm leaving
kind.
for my food podcast, right? So
Yeah,
That's great.
all right. Yeah, well, there
This
is
is my
that.
grand farewell.
He's
my
leaving to
grand
fleet his
farewell.
crest.
Jesus.